someone asked me today, what are the first things that immediately come to your mind when you think about Charlie? My answer would be his zest for life, his never-ending smile, his silly and childish antics, his loyalty to all the University of Florida football games, his love for alcohol, and his big heart. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these topics. When I think of Charlie, I think of his zest for life. A few days ago, I was speaking with Charlie's wife, Pam, over the phone, and she shared a few things with me about Charlie. She told me that one of the things that instantly drew her to Charlie was his carefree attitude and sometimes silly view of the world. Pam admitted that she was the serious one in their relationship, and that he brought balance to their lives. His silliness and crazy antics were a constant reminder to her that life is about laughing, living for the moment, and never letting barriers keep you from the things in life you enjoy doing most. We all know that Charlie loved his rock and roll music. If there was a concert he wanted to go to, nothing would hold him back, even if it meant he would show up in a wheelchair and an IV connected to his arm. If it was turkey hunting season, he would be the first in the woods at 6 a.m. listening to the turkeys gobble. Some of you may not know that Charlie kept notes on everything. The country he visited, his coin collection, his hunting trips, and the days that the waves were good. No matter if he was drawing art, writing poetry, or making a Hallmark card from scratch for the people he loved in his life, he put his heart into everything he did. When I think of Charlie, I think of his never-ending smile. Charlie was born with physical challenges that most of us will never understand or experience in our lifetime. Every time I would visit him while he was in the hospital, I would ask myself, how is it that Charlie can lay there with a big smile on his face, laughing at anything and everything? Sometimes he'd have the TV on and he'd be laughing at just anything. I would ask myself, also, why do people have great health complain so much about trivial things in life? Yet I never heard Charlie complaining about anything. No matter what, Charlie always found a way to keep smiling. He loved playing jokes on people and getting reactions. I know some of you worked with him. One of his favorite things to do was wear these bright red pants to work, just to see how many comments were made by his fellow employees. Some of you remember that. He would even count the number of people that would make comments and then come home to Pam and tell her about it.
He would.
Some of you remember. He used to climb trees at parties just to entertain people. Until one day he fell 30 feet and broke his collarbone. He would honor some of us with nicknames he would pull out of the sky. He named himself Squeege, his wife Snuggler. He then took the two names and created a hybrid called Snudgy, which became their pup's name. During our days in college, Charlie and I, he named me Corn Budgie. To this day, I don't really know where that name came from or what it means. I understand he also gave the name Squirrel to his buddy Randy Rudgman. When I think of Charlie, I think of his loyalty to the Gator football. I attended more football games with Charlie than anyone else on this planet. He definitely loved his Gators. I'm going to hold up a t-shirt just for a moment. Anytime I see a t-shirt like this, and I know we have some fans in the audience, I will instantly and forever think of Charlie. And speaking of Gators, and I'm talking a real Gator, this was a gift he gave me about a year ago. I've even put it on the pillows of some of my friends when they were at home. They come home and it's here. Some of my friends would think this is the most unusual and unpredictable gift that anyone could ever get. But you know what? To me, this will probably be my most treasured asset. When I think of Charlie, I think of his love for alcohol. Charlie and I met while he and I were both attending college at the University of Florida. I remember the night so vividly. We were in a nightclub called the Islands in downtown Gainesville watching a band perform. I happened to sit in the chair next to him. He and I struck up a conversation instantly. I remember thinking to myself, how can a guy of this size drink so many beers? Charlie certainly loved his alcohol. He also loved his motorcycles. Unfortunately, the two didn't go well together. His father's looking at me now. He's been through a lot with that. But by the end of the night, Charlie was pretty wasted. Even though I only knew this man for a few hours, I felt an instant bond with him. I also felt an obligation to make sure he got home safely. I ended up driving him back to my place in my car and leaving his motorcycle at the nightclub and putting him to bed on the couch in the living room. The next day he woke up and abruptly asked, "Where the hell am I?" He had no recollection of me driving him home that night. That was the summer of 1982. That was 30 years ago. Have you heard the phrase, you can count on one hand the number of true friends you will ever have in life? Well, Charlie became one of those friends for me. Years after college was over, he would remember to send me a card every birthday and call me on the phone just to talk about anything and everything, especially had to do with Gator football. One of the greatest moments of my life was when he asked me to be his best man at his first wedding. I have a closing statement. Charlie will forever be in our hearts and minds. I'm sure everyone in this room will agree with me that he was one of the kindest human beings we have ever known. Each of us will take away something from our experiences with this man. For me, Charlie taught me that life is short. Never let anything keep you from your dreams. And there is never a reason to complain about anything. The minute I think I am having difficulty in life and I'm about to complain, I need only pause and think of Charlie and remember his never-ending smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll hear from Matt now.
Good job, Steve. And I see you got the email on the blue shirt. So. That brought back some memories too. I was at the University of Florida, not at the same time, but we never got a chance to cross paths. But lots of good Gator memories, and there was a few of us in the same office that were Gators. Charlie never hesitated for the opportunity to yell "Go Gators" sometimes. A couple of coworkers up here. Moral support. You know, Charlie had a big work family, and anybody who worked with Charlie, if you're not already standing, just please stand and recognize that he had a big family of workers. So, have you guys ever seen a grown man cry? These guys are supposed to keep an eye on it. Well, I'm up here today to help us to honor Charlie, our friend, son, husband, brother, stepdad, pawpaw, co-worker, surf buddy, hunting partner, survivor, and lover of life. This is an interactive experience, and if at any time you feel called to say something, please just raise your hand. We will all benefit from the shared memories, and Charlie is smiling down on us now from his tree stand in the sky, knowing we were talking about him. He loved the attention. I have to assume that most everyone here knew Charlie in some fashion, whether it was for his love for being outdoors, hunting turkeys or surfing, his medical condition, or his devotion to his family and his wife Pam. You probably already heard, or you will hear, stories of his childhood, family trips, maybe his home life. Today, I'm going to speak on behalf of Charlie's work family. When you work closely with someone for years and years, some of us more than 20, you spend 8+ hours Monday through Friday, many weekends, and late night work shifts. You get to know them pretty well, sometimes too well. You know their hobbies, family issues, strengths and weaknesses, eating habits, and sorry Charlie, but bathroom habits. Yeah. I think if Charlie were standing here today, he would want to introduce his working family to his home family. He would say, Dave, Pete, I'd like you to meet my mom and dad, who without them fighting for my health as I grew up, teaching me how to hunt and fish, I would not be the person I am today. And Pete, if you were kind of like Charlie's dad at work, I guess, Dave, that makes you kind of his mama. So then he would say, Dawn, Mike, Joel, Rick, meet my sisters, Julie and Dawn, and my brother Tony. Without them helping me along, pushing me to be strong, I would not be here today. And finally he would say, everyone, this is my wife Pam, whom I love very much, who has been at my side, fighting for me when I couldn't. Without her, I would not have made it through my 63 days in coma. So now that we all know each other, let's talk about Charlie, the engineer. Many of you knew that Charlie worked at the Kennedy Space Center, but you may not know what job he actually did. For most of his 23-year career, Charlie was a system engineer in the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen cryogenics group. He was responsible for operations and maintenance of an elaborate system of pipes, pumps, tanks, valves, and hoses filled with liquid at 300 degrees below zero and gases at 3,000 psi. Then, right before launch, he would sit at a console in the Launch Control Center as a key member of the team that loaded the cryogenic liquid oxygen into the space shuttle external tank, readying the vehicle for liftoff. His office was at the launch pad, just off the beach, where many days you could hear the sounds of crashing surf. On the top of the pad was a 250-foot tower that he spent countless hours on. The view of the Atlantic and the surrounding coastline is spectacular from that height, and Charlie loved to be up there in the open air with the shuttle. We all did. One of his duties when the shuttle was at the pad was to perform a daily walk down of the tower, from top to bottom. And we were not allowed to bring our cell phones, as they could cause radio interference with the shuttle. I don't know, Pete, if you want to tell the rest of this one. I live it. I'm good. Well, one day after finishing the walk down, Charlie gets in the elevator for the ride down with Pete, our manager, a little bit of a stickler for the rules. As soon as the doors closed and the elevator started descending, the air is filled with the sound of gobble, gobble, gobble. Charlie's phone goes off. It was obvious who the culprit was. Charlie would love to take his schematics and head outside just to walk around our system, and he could spot problems that others would never see, whether it was a loose electrical connection, a slightly audible leak, or a valve left in the wrong position. No offense, Gil. He was a great engineer with a keen attention to detail. He earned many accolades and awards at the Space Center, and he taught me so much. Even driving into work, he was always on the lookout. I could be right behind him all the way down State Road 3, all the way out to the launch pad, and when we get to the office, he'd get out of his car and say, Matt, did you see those baby hogs on the side of the road? Did you see that eagle carrying that snake? And I was like, no, what the hell are you talking about? To this day, I make a special effort to keep my eye out for wildlife and things, just thanks to Charlie. And speaking of the road, you never knew what roadkill he would pick up on the way. Driving through the wildlife refuge was lots of opportunity for that. On any given day, our freezer or worth could contain gator, turkey, deer, rattlesnake, or even owl. That was probably a federal offense, but Charlie had just a handful of bosses at the Space Center, as he chose to work in the same group for the majority of his time at KSC. Pete was here today, and Mike Gore, also one of his managers. He's here today. I know they have fond memories of Charlie. Our office was pretty small, and there were many times that you could hear Charlie call home during the day, knowing well and good that Pam was at work. And when the answering machine would answer, and pick up, he would shout to the dogs, "Snarchy, Diggler!" On the phone for about a 5-minute conversation. Just making the only strange noises that only Charlie could make. Right, Pam, you must have came home from work sometimes and heard these messages.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he deleted them for you. So these random strange noises were a specialty of Charlie's. You really never knew what was going to come out of his mouth at any given time. Sometimes it was a turkey gobble sound, other times it was just a loud grunt. And one of the things he liked to do was yell phrases at people long distances away. So it was not uncommon to be out at the pad, either up on the tower or somewhere, and he'd see somebody off in the distance, and he'd be like, "Hey, Dennis, surf's up!" Or he'd pump his fist, "Go Gators," with that, look on his face, Charlie. And one of his favorites, "Pearson, I'm going to kick your ass." To which Dave would reply, "Go ahead and try." It would go downhill from there. I think I can speak for everyone that knew him at the Space Center. There was not a person that did not respect Charlie for his willpower and determination. I, like everyone else, was so impressed by his perseverance in his fight to keep himself healthy. Whether it was going for one of many swims at Playlinda after work, doing breathing treatments at his desk, or hitting the Space Center gym for a workout, he was an amazing example to us all. To say Charlie was thrifty is an understatement. His attempts at fixing things for the absolute least amount of cost were legendary around our shop. I remember the time he wanted some boat trailer guides installed on the back of his trailer to make it easier to load his boat. But you can buy these things anywhere. A kit, bolt on, a couple hours, you're done. But not Charlie. His had to be homemade, engineered by 6 Space Center workers, made from materials cobbled from around his house, and it'd take 3 days to drill, grind, bend, and install these things. And I can't tell you how many eBay purchases he would bring into the shop for Dave to fix. Those bastards sent me another broken. The old blank carburetor, electric window switch. He brought in all kinds of stuff. Many of you probably remember the old red Isuzu Rodeo he had. Before he was going to sell it, he wanted to keep the trailer ball hitch off the back. He wanted that thing. He wanted to let it go with the truck. Well, this thing must have been years since he had removed this thing. It was like welded in place. He could not get it out. So what seemed like gallons of PB Blaster and numerous beatings with a sledgehammer, it wouldn't come off. So he had it out the launch pad, and he'd be out there. Well, finally, he just took the whole hitch off, bolted the whole thing off the truck, and brought it into the shop for Dave. So they mounted it on the vise, which is the vise about this big. You can put a smart card in the middle of it. And they, again, beat on it for another until it finally succumbed to separated. You all have probably heard about the extensive use of acronyms at KSC. There, I just used one. So you'd always hear at the PA something like OV105 rollover to the VAB for ETSRB mate on MLP1 is scheduled for 0800 GMT. That was common. But Charlie had a very unique system of his own. And Steve, you talked about him taking notes on everything. Well, Charlie had his own Charlie Speak, we called it. And he wrote his notes in his Charlie Speak, and he loved to create these cheat sheets for the different jobs that we had. For example, if we were changing the oil in a pump, he would write down notes of like what size the socket to use, maybe the torque, how long it took for the oil to drain. So the next time you ran the job, if it was 6 months later, you would remember these things. So he would write something like this. So I don't know if you can see this, but this says V, O period, L period, the greater than symbol 5 QTS. Okay? And you look at that, does everyone know what that might mean? It means verify the oil level is greater than 5 quarts. It's right there. And that's how he wrote the whole document. We all worked on the same equipment. We'd read this and say, what the hell is this? Translate. So he would have been a great text messenger, you know, but he was before his time. So let's talk about food. Where did Charlie get his affinity towards toasted or burnt sandwich bread? Or anything that can be burned in his toaster oven? Ted, did that come from you?
We tried to wean him, but
Well, he had a reputation for leaving stuff in the toaster oven and just walking away. Only to have smoke alarms go off. Fire department ask Ed. Fire department would roll out. And on more than one occasion, I saw him running out the door with a smoking bag of popcorn, or hand carrying the whole microwave flame was coming out. Who knows what was inside of that? He loved to throw his food scraps outside after lunch to draw the turkey vultures, and he could watch them fight for the scraps. Well, that stopped later when the space shuttle struck a vulture after liftoff. There was a big investigation. Have you ever seen Uncle Si on Duck Dynasty? Has anybody ever see that guy? You know, he'd be like, "What? What? That's how he was." So I worked many late nights, we all did, with Charlie in the firing room, sitting at the console. His work ethic was impeccable. In order to sit on console, you had to be certified. You had to go through a series of job training packages and a test and whatnot. There's 3 levels of certification to operate the system, one being the highest. After I came into the group, which it was about 10 years before the end of the program, I started working my way through those levels, level 3, level 2, and so I always wondered why Charlie, he'd been in the group for a long time, he'd been a level 2 for so long, and he never tried to get his level 1. And we talked for many times, and he shared his concern about not being good enough for the top cert. Well, we all knew Charlie had the system knowledge and expertise. He did. His attention to detail was amazing. And it was getting through this test part that was the hurdle. Well, everybody in our group was determined to help him get his level 1 certification. And after many weeks of preparation, I remember the day he went for his test, and he took it. He was nervous, but he knew that it was something that he had to do for himself. I was so proud of him that day when Pete sent out the email announcing to everyone that Charlie had earned his level 1 certification. It was not long after that I had the privilege to sit next to him in the firing room for a tank loading and launch. He repeated that task with professionalism many times, all the way through the last space shuttle launch. I would like to thank Pam and commend her for sticking by her man through sickness and health, good times and bad. It's been an honor for Julie and I to be your Charlie's friends. And Ted, I have heard many stories of your hunting trips over the years. He obviously loved and respected you, and I will miss hearing those. And Tony, Charlie loved to brag on your fishing skills too. I often heard about the great catches you made in Cowley's Creek or at the New Smyrna Beach Surf, and I could tell he was really proud of you. We will all miss him dearly. His body that served him for 51 years is no longer needed. If there is such a thing as turkeys in heaven, Charlie will be sitting there in his great blind in the sky, ready for him. God bless Charlie. Thank you.